The Sphere of Amente and Soul Ascension rescue mission from Tara. The Sphere of Mente was entered into Earth's core within the second dimensional frequency bands, often called the Cave of Creation, about 550 million years ago, from position in Harmonic Universe 2 space-time that existed before the Earth existed within that Harmonic Universe 2 time track. The rescue mission for Terra's lost souls was begun before those souls became lost in terms of linear time. Such things are quite practical within the structure of the time matrix. Through the covenant of Palador and the Sphere of Amente, the souls of Earth could re-evolve back into their original 12-strand DNA body type. This process can be viewed as the Paladorians creating new bodies and morphogenic blueprints for the now formless consciousness fragments of the fallen souls. The Sphere of Amente morphogenetic field allowed for the Uterinates to enter incarnational cycles on Earth, pick up the fragments of consciousness from the lost souls by pulling their energetic particles from the Harmonic Universe 1 unified fields into the DNA, merging the consciousness of the soul fragments with the embodied Uteranate consciousness, thereby allowing this composite identity to evolve through a sentient life form back into its original soul matrix, the Tauranusium 12-strand prototype. This evolutionary plan was not immediately set in motion, though the Sphere of Amente was set within Earth's morphogenic field nearly 550 million years ago. The Earth grid had to evolve and pick up grid speed before the Sphere of Amente could begin birthing its new races. Between 250 and 550 million years ago, various other species seeded by H1U and H1U ET visitors evolved on Earth. Some of whom became members of your planet, animal, and insect kingdoms. Various groups of etheric beings without matter density also spent time on your planet. The races of the Sphere of Amente finally began to appear on Earth about 250 million years ago. Before their appearance, more intergalactic wars were fought by races who did not want the covenant of Palador to be fulfilled. These wars were primarily fought on Terra, becoming part of a long history of confrontations that were simply termed the Terran Wars. Once the Earth territory was secured, the Uterinates of the Sphere of Amente began birthing on Earth. This began what came to be known as the Tauranusium 2 or T2 experiment. This represented the seeding of the 12 tribes out of which your present human lineages has emerged. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they're referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, next part says the halls of Mente, the cloistered races of Parallel Earth, the Second World Rescue Mission Stage 1. And this was 250 through 25 million years ago. From the Sphere of Amente, 5 smaller spheres were created, which became the morphogenetic patterns for 5 races known as the cloistered races. Collectively, the 5 cloistered races were called the Paladorians, as they represented the beginning of the fulfillment of the covenant of the Palador. They represented the earthly counterparts to the larger Paladorian group from Harmonic Universe 2 of the original Tauranusium 1 12-strand DNA package. Each Paladorian race held the morphogenetic imprint for DNA strands 7 through 12, which held the electrotonal frequencies corresponding to dimensions 7 and 12, or 7 through 12, plus the imprint for strand 1, and each of the 5 groups carried the imprint for one additional DNA strand corresponding to dimensions 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The cloisters served as guardians for the evolution of the additional DNA strand to which they were assigned. Each race had 8 strands of DNA manifest within the body structure. The 5 cloistered races did not possess gender, nor did they originally possess the degree of matter density with which you are familiar. Density of form developed over time throughout the course of their evolution on Earth between 250 million and 25 million years ago. The 5 cloistered races were the Antrians, brown skin, strand 2, with 2 strands, or strand number 2. The Bruno, or Brunoa, red skin, strand number 3. Hebrew, or Hibiru, white-skinned, strand 4, and then the Melchizedeks, yellow skin, strand 5, Uniceti, black skin, strand 6. The cloistered races populated the earth for many generations, creating various racial mixes through which many of the lost souls of Terra were able to ascend. This period of great civilization became known as the Second World, in parentheses, as 250 through 25 million years ago. Within your present Native American culture, many of these souls ascended. Those who digressed returned to the sphere of Amente to rebirth on Earth in the particle universe as members of the root races. The first world represented the original Tura Nusium culture of Terra 560 to 550 million years ago. The Palidorian cloistered races left no remnants in your present world, for they evolved within the faster-moving time bands of Earth within the antiparticle universe. The morphogenetic fields of those races were then drawn into your particle Earth, and out of these came the next evolutionary stage. The first and second etheric root races of Gaia, rescue mission number 2, 25 through 20 million years ago. Before manifestation into embodiment on your Earth, the 5 cloistered races divided into 2 groups. One group held the DNA imprint for half of the first strand of DNA, which corresponds to Dimension 1 frequencies. The other group held the remaining half for the first strand, or the other remaining half of the first strand. This created polarization and gender within the cloistered race morphogenetic field. Both groups held the dimensional code strands of 7 through 12. These 2 groups were seated on Gaia, the 7th dimensional harmonic universe 3 counterpart to Terra and Earth. These 2 races were the first 2 root races, the Polarians of Gaia and the Hyperbornians of Gaia's antiparticle double. These beings were of a much less dense or etheric nature, but through their evolution on Gaia, 25 through 20 million years ago, the pathways of evolution through dimensional ascension were reopened for the lost souls of Terra. These races anchored the morphogenetic fields of Dimension 7 through 12 into Dimension 1 on and Earth. Though their evolution, the one strand of the 12-strand DNA package was pulled together in Earth particles and connect to the Turanusium morphogenetic field. The Halls of Amente Rescue Mission, Stage 3, 25 million years ago, the morphogenetic consciousness of the 5 cloistered races held within the sphere of Amente began the 3rd stage of seeding humans on Earth 25 million years ago. They opened the sphere of Amente within the Earth core in Dimension 2, which opened a portal to bridge to Terra's core in Dimension 5, a portal that linked the Earth of 25 million years ago with pre-cataclysmic Terra of 550 million years ago. Working with the priesthoods of Ur and Mu on Terra, the consciousness of the 5 cloistered races created 5 other portal bridges five other portal bridge extensions from the center of the sphere of Amente, each of the 5 opening into dimensional fields 2 through 6. Dimensional fields represent positions in space-time within the time matrix, stages a planet or being will pass through in its evolutionary progression of dimensional ascension. The 6 portals from the sphere of Amente, the original one to Terra's past, and 5 new ones into various stages of Earth's future, linked Terra's past through various time periods on Earth into Terra's future, creating a new track in time through which Earth could re-evolve into the 5th dimensional frequency bands and merge with Terra. Once this merger was accomplished, Earth would become Terra. New lands would open up within and emerge upon Earth, and Terra would reclaim the energetic thrust lost in its fall, so evolution into the 7th dimensional Gaia could continue. The 6 portals in the sphere of Amente also allowed the 5 cloistered races to incarnate into dimensional bands time fields 2 through 6, pulling into their consciousness and body forms the fragmented consciousness of the lost souls from each of those dimensional bands. The time codes, frequency patterns, from the first dimensional strand of DNA that had been built up through root races 1 and 2 would link into the frequencies of dimensions 2 through 6. The consciousness within the sphere of Amente would leave the morphogenetic field and express into manifestation as root races within each of those dimensional bands, building up into the DNA pattern strands 2 through 6. Through this pattern of building the DNA through time, incarnates within each time period dimensional band would be able to pull together the frequencies of their dimensional strands, and it says in parentheses, through a series of 24 incarnations, 212 cycles, link with the morphogenetic field of their cloistered race, pick up strands 7 through 12 from the cloister, pass through the other cloisters to pick up the remaining root race strands, rebuilding the 12-strand DNA package. As the 12 DNA strands were assembled, the body form of the incarnate would progressively transmute into a less dense state and ascend into Harmonic Universe 2 on Terra. Originally, only one Earth body was needed for this process. As the form would assemble the DNA patterns within the 212 cycles in one very long lifetime and then transmute and descend. Well, shit, that sounds complicated. All right, let's keep reading. The ascension occurred... The ascension occurred through the portal from the sphere of Amente to which the incarnate's dimension band time period was connected. Once passing through its dimensional portal into the sphere of Amente, the incarnate could enter one of the other portal bridges and appear on Terra in a future space-time coordinate, becoming free from Harmonic Universe 1. Through this process, the consciousness of Terra's fragmented parts would be returned to Terra's planetary grid piece by piece, progressively de-densifying the matter particles of Earth and transmuting them back into Terra's grid. As the lost souls returned to Terra, so did the lost portions of Terra's morphogenetic field. You know, all these portals and things that they talk about, there's a lot of ancient sites that have portals in them, and I wonder if this is what it's talking about. Like down in Peru, there's that big portal, I think by Lake Titicaca, and then there's a bunch of other portal sites. But I think a lot of them, I mean, any of them that have like significant technology in them, I think the military's got a lot of those locations on lockdown, especially here in the United States. Like any significant sites, the military goes in there and takes everything, and then They, bury stuff, they hide stuff, and then they'll open it up to the tourists later if they don't continue to just keep it on lockdown and completely inaccessible. Like down in the Grand Canyon and over by Sedona in northern Arizona, there's all kinds of sites with ancient petroglyphs and caves and underground cities and stuff that they monitor 24 hours a day by the military. Though the dynamics of this process are complicated, the principle is simple. The portals within the sphere of Amente served as a time portal structure through which the lost substance energetic thrust of Terra could be returned, and the lost souls of Terra could return to their original identity as souls incarnated upon the planet Terra. In ancient Terran history, this planet had once, not long ago, eons before the 560 million years ago Tauranusium seeding, been located within the first harmonic universe and had successfully evolved into the fifth dimension and second harmonic universe. The fall represented a portion of Terra being thrown back into its own past, through which it had to re-evolve in order for the planet to evolve into its natural future. The portals within the sphere of Amente operated as a warp in time through which re-evolution could take place more quickly. The human lineage is an intimate part of that re-evolutionary plan, and this plan is the underlying hidden dynamic and purpose for the present human evolution. This plan is part of a larger Terran Gaian evolutionary plan, which ultimately will lead to all consciousness evolved, returning to its source. The source of Amente contains the purposes of mechanics of humanity's evolutionary blueprint. The time portal structures within the sphere of the evolutionary... Oh, sorry, no, I just read that. The time portal structures within the sphere of the Amente, or the sphere of Amente, regulate the process of humanity's dimensional ascension, evolution, or quote-unquote return to God. The portals within the morphogenetic field of the sphere of Amente are known as the halls of Amente, that's talked about a lot in the teachings of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. They are the dimensional passage ways one must pass through in order to ascend from Earth, out of the time matrix and dimensional reality. The halls of Amente have been closely guarded secret since the time of your inception on Earth, and the priests of Ur and Mu, their earthly descendants, and the extraterrestrial and metaterrestrial ancestors of your Tauranusium lineage from the harmonic universes 2 through 5 have been the guardians of this secret since the time of its inception 550 million years ago. The staff of Amente, blue frame morphogenetic field, the ivory gates of Terra, 25 million years ago. Once the halls of Mente were created 25 million years ago, the priest of Ur on Tara drew out from Tara's fifth dimensional core and pattern of frequency that represented the morphogenetic field for the entire planetary grid structure. They removed from Terra the morphogenetic field through which Terra drew its energy imprint for its grid line structure and matter form. By removing this form-holding energy field from Terra's core, Terra could no longer build a bridge of frequency between its core and Gaia's core at the 8th dimensional metagalactic core. This removal of Terra's interior morphogenetic field was done out of necessity. If the morphogenetic field had remained within Terra's core, Terra's progression of dimensional ascension into the third harmonic universe would have continued up to a point. When the planetary grid of Terra had pulled in the remaining frequency bands from the unified fields of dimensions 5 and 6 through the morphogenetic field at its core, it would next begin to pull in the frequencies of the 7th dimension and begin its ascent into the Gaian planetary grid structure. This is the natural path of evolution for the planet. However, if the seventh dimensional frequency bands entered and expanded Terra's morphogenetic field, certain portions of these frequencies could not plug into the grid lines of the planet as they needed to, because portions of these grid lines had been ripped apart during the fall event. The energy carrying the frequencies of Dimension 7 that could not pass into the framework of the planet's energetic structure would build up within the morphogenetic field of Terra's core, eventually causing the entire grid system and the planet to explode. The morphogenetic field of Terra had to be temporarily removed from the planet's core, which would leave Terra with the ability to draw energy through its grid from the unified fields of dimensions 4 through 6, but would not allow any higher frequency energies to enter its grid system. This meant that Terra would be trapped in the time bands of Harmonic Universe 2, unable to evolve out of those frequencies until its morphogenetic field had been returned to the planetary core. The planet had to remain connected to its morphogenetic field in order to retain its form, but the field could not be stored within the planet's structure. The morphogenetic field of Terra had to be placed within the portions of the original morphogenetic field that had been blown apart, broken down among the 12 Harmonic Universe 1 planets. Each of the 12 planets would hold a portion of Terra's morphogenetic Terra's morphogenetic field, and Terra could draw in sustaining energy from each of those areas. Meanwhile, the other planets would process the dimensional frequency patterns that Terra could not synthesize. So like all the other planets are able to like evolve, and we're like stuck in this this frequency bandwidth from what I understand so far. Once a Harmonic Universe 1 planet pulled in its portion of the higher dimensional frequencies, it would then undergo dimensional ascension back into Terra's grid, bringing with it its portion of the Terran morphogenetic field. Terra could not ascend into Harmonic Universe 3 and become Gaia until each of its Harmonic Universe 1 planets complete the manifestation of their portion of the morphogenetic field and ascended back into the Terran grid. The time when this will occur is many millions of years in your future, but each planet in your solar system has its part to play in this program. Each planet received its portion of the Terran morphogenetic field. Earth received its portion 25 million years ago when the halls of Amente were constructed. The 5 cloistered races of the sphere of Amente retrieved their frequency pattern 25 million years ago. This pattern of energy morphogenetic field had the appearance of a standing wave pattern composed of 4th and 5th dimensional frequencies, and thus appearing as blue in color. Visually, this standing wave pattern looks like an electric blue flame with a pale shade of green, several inches in height. The blue flame, which constitutes Earth's portion of Terra's morphogenetic field, was brought into the sphere of Amente by the 5 cloistered races and the priests or the priesthoods of Ur and Mu. The 5th dimensional frequency patterns held in the blue flame allowed for the halls of Amente to open, so the seeding and evolution of the 5 remaining root races could begin on Earth. The flame was stored within the sphere of Amente. As long as it was there, the portals between Earth's dimension or dimensional time periods, and Terra remained open. The souls of Earth could ascend out of harmonic universe 1 incarnational cycles and continue their evolution through Terra. The blue flame became known as the Staff of Amente, which is the item referred to in your Bible as the Staff of God, or the rod and the staff. The rod represents the standing wave pattern within Earth's core in dimension 2, gold in or orange gold in color, and composed of the frequency patterns of dimension 1, 2, and 3. The blue flame Staff of Amente was composed of frequency patterns of dimensions 4, 5, and 6, and allowed Terra's morphogenetic field to link the double flame at Gaia's core, the violet and pale gold flame that would allow Gaia to link with the white gold flame of the metagalactic core, which we speak of in the colored flames. We are referring to the multiple bands of frequency of which morphogenetic fields are composed. Colors represent spectra of light, and light represents the manifestation of patterns of dimensional electrotonal frequency. There's another little footnote down here. It says the other planets had undergone a similar sphere and Hall's creation at various other times, each set being named after the portion of the morphogenetic field it carried. Okay, so they've done this to other planets according to this data. All right, let's keep reading here. Through linking the frequency bands of dimensions 1 through 7 within the morphogenetic field, a planet or person can ascend, evolve out of the matter-based systems and into pure sentient consciousness. This is the evolutionary process. So the blue flame Staff of Amente, stored within the time warp morphogenetic field of the sphere of Amente, represents the key to the evolution of Earth and the human lineage, and one of the keys to the evolution of the planets in your solar system, Terra and Gaia. The Staff of Amente is the gateway into Terra's morphogenetic field. Whether the staff is held within Terra's core or within the sphere of Amente at Earth's core, it represents the gateway to which the halls of Amente lead. I mean, this is pretty in alignment with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth that I've read on my channels before and recorded it audiobook style. I mean, this is just it's just reaffirming all the stuff in the Emerald Tablets, but just with a lot more detail in terms of like the ascension and the portals and the different dimensions. Because I mean, all this stuff is mentioned in the Emerald Tablets, just not on such a detailed level. One can pass into the halls of Amente, but must pass through the blue flame in order to transmute, form, and appear on Terra. In later Egyptian mystery schools, the blue flame gateway became known as the Gates of Ivory and became translated in the Bible terms as the pearly gates of heaven. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Because even a lot of the stuff in the Bible, like, it's been so manipulated and mistranslated and retranslated and copied and plagiarized and stuff added in and the wrong definitions given to it. So this whole idea of like the gates of heaven, you know, obviously in the Bible, it's been they twisted it into this Hegelian dialectic fear-mongering campaign with the whole heaven and hell narrative, which is all BS. But according to this is where the idea first came from, which makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. In each case, the writings referred to the blue flame Staff of Amente, the energetic gateway to Terra, needless to say, the sphere of Amente, and the staff, which allows the halls of Amente to open into Terra, are quite valuable commodities. Every human on Earth now is, in some way, energetically connected to the race morphogenetic field within the sphere of Amente, and it is through the halls of Amente or through the Terran morphogenetic sphere within one of the other 11 planets in your solar system that you must ascend to fulfill your evolutionary imprint as souls and return to your creator creative source. Well, that's very interesting. Root races, cloistered races, forming the 5 physical root races and their cloisters blueprint for evolution through DNA assembly rescue mission stage 4, 25 million years ago. After the staff of Amente was set within the sphere of Amente at Earth's Dimension 2 core, the forming of the 5 remaining root races began. The 5 cloistered races within the morphogenetic field of the sphere polarized, splitting their energy fields, each creating 2 smaller morphogenetic fields within the sphere of Amente. The 10 new spheres collectively held the blueprint for DNA strands 1 through 12. Each of the 5 cloistered races was responsible for the evolution of 1 pair of these new morphogenetic fields. Each sphere became the morphogenetic field for 1 root race plus its companion cloister race that would simultaneously manifest into physical expression on Earth during the time periods that corresponded to the dimensional DNA strand to which each race was appointed. These 5 morphogenetic fields became root races 3 through 7, through which DNA strands 2 through 6 would be assembled. Each root race was responsible for assembling 1 strand of DNA, while its companion cloister race would hold the imprint of that strand plus strands 7 through 12. The cloister race would appear first, and through this race, its root race would emerge. The cloistered race broke down into 5 cloistered subraces, and each subrace further broke down into 5 cloistered families. The root race would then break down into 7 subraces, and each of the 7 subraces would further break down into 7 families. Soul fragments from the dimension that corresponded to the DNA strand of the root race would be pulled from the unified field of that dimension into the body form, progressively pulling the frequency bands of that dimension into the DNA until all the frequencies of that dimension were assembled into the morphogenetic field of the body. This process was to be accomplished within 24 incarnations, i.e. 212 cycles, that were lived in one body. With the morphogenetic field in the sphere of Amente holding the pattern for the body form, souls trapped within that dimension could begin merging their consciousness with the new body form and the 24 cycles of incarnation, pull their consciousness into a pattern that vibrated high enough to merge with the sphere of Amente. Okay, that's very interesting. So according to this, with your 24 lives was supposedly supposed to be pulling your conscious vibration into this evolution. Soul fragments would incarnate once, then transmute through each of the 7 families of its subrace, then through each of the 5 cloistered families of its cloistered subrace, building up the lower frequency patterns, bass tones of that dimension into the DNA through its first transmutations within the families. Next, the now more evolved soul would transmute into each of the 7 subraces of its root race, then into each of the 5 cloistered subraces of its cloistered race, building upon the higher frequency patterns, overtones, in parentheses, of that dimension into the DNA. In the final transmutation, in which all of the frequency patterns for that dimension were pulled into the DNA, and the completed strand assembled, the incarnate then carried the full base tone pattern of its root race and the particle overtones of its cloistered race within the DNA. In this final phase, the incarnate's body, DNA, and consciousness would transmute the base tones and overtones within the DNA strand, merging to create a resonant tone through which the identity could merge with the cloister race morphogenetic field in the sphere of Amente, where it would pick up the remaining activation DNA codes overtones from the cloister. The cloister race held the high-frequency DNA codes overtones for that dimension, which match the base tone frequency patterns of the body double in the parallel Earth. These are called the activation codes, as they allow the DNA particles to merge with their antiparticles, creating transmutation of the matter particles and antiparticles through which DNA strand 7 through 12 could plug into the operating genetic code. The root races held the lower frequency base tone codes of Earth. Once both sets of the DNA codes were assembled in the DNA through the 24 transmutations, the overtone activation codes from the cloister would allow the incarnate to enter its cloister's morphogenetic field within the sphere of Amente, where DNA strands 7 through 12 would plug into the activation codes. This would open the morphogenetic field of the Palladorian's collective 5 cloistered races, where the codes of the other root races could be assembled and the full 12-strand DNA pattern would be restored. As this process of DNA activation took place, the incarnate was enabled to enter the blue flame morphogenetic field of Terra with its consciousness, which began the activation of DNA strands 7 through 12 within the body. This process increased the rate of pulsation of the matter particles of the body into harmonic universe 2 patterns, which allowed the incarnate to turn its body into light, pass through the halls of Mente as pure energy, then remanifest within a less dense version of that body on Terra. The 24 transmutations were lived in one body, which progressively transmuted as the DNA assembled until later genetic distortion. Originally, the human body was designed to transmute and ascend, not die and reincarnate. The 24 cycles of the transmutation later became 24 cycles of incarnation, or birth and death, through which the DNA would assemble as the consciousness passed from one life to another. The original human body was immortal. Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. Remember the Epic of Gilgamesh? Even in the Hollywood films, there was a movie about all the gods of mythology, and it was called The Immortals. And then there was some messing around with the DNA, all kinds of different tampering and with the DNA and the codes and all this. But this is pretty interesting stuff, if you ask me. Okay, let's take a little break, and we'll pick up again shortly.